Sebastian Zane's eyes swept across the crowded press conference, settling on a woman in the third row who wasn't nodding along like the others. While most journalists scribbled his carefully crafted statements about ZaneTech's latest environmental initiative, she sat with arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. The intensity of her gaze unnerved him. She was clearly waiting for something, like a predator watching for the perfect moment to strike. "I'll take one more question," Sebastian announced, deliberately pointing to her, curious about what was behind that skeptical expression. She stood, notebook in hand. "Fiona Zimmerman, Independent Chronicle. Mr. Zane, you're promoting this new green technology while conveniently ignoring that your company's manufacturing facility in Henderson has violated EPA regulations 3 times in the past year. Do you expect the public to believe you care about the environment when your actions suggest otherwise?" The room fell silent. Sebastian's PR team shifted uncomfortably behind him. He hadn't expected this. Most reporters at these events asked softball questions designed to generate easy headlines. "That's an excellent question, Miss Zimmerman," he replied smoothly, adjusting his tie. "The violations you mention were addressed immediately and resulted in comprehensive procedural changes. I'd be happy to provide you with documentation of those improvements after the conference." "I've already requested that documentation through official channels twice." "Your company denied both requests," she countered without missing a beat. Something in Sebastian's practiced demeanor cracked. This woman had done her homework, and he suddenly realized he hadn't been briefed on this particular issue. His PR director stepped forward, ready to intervene, but Sebastian raised a hand to stop him. "That's unacceptable," he said firmly. "If you'll leave your contact information, I'll personally ensure you receive everything by end of business tomorrow." Fiona's eyebrows shot up in surprise, but she quickly regained her composure. "I'll believe it when I see it, Mr. Zane." As the conference wrapped up, Sebastian found himself watching her gather her things. There was something refreshing about her directness in a world where most people told him exactly what he wanted to hear. "James," he said to his assistant, "find out everything you can about Fiona Zimmerman from the Independent Chronicle." The next morning, a thick file landed on Sebastian's desk. Fiona Zimmerman, 29, award-winning investigative journalist known for exposing corporate corruption. Graduate of Columbia Journalism School. Previously worked for major publications before joining the smaller but respected Independent Chronicle, where she had more freedom to pursue in-depth investigations. Currently working on a series about corporate environmental accountability. Sebastian leaned back in his chair, considering the information. She wasn't just throwing random accusations, she was building something bigger. And ZaneTech was clearly in her crosshairs. His phone rang his environmental compliance officer confirming they had indeed denied Miss Zimmerman's information requests, citing proprietary technology concerns. "Override that," Sebastian ordered. "Send her everything, and I want to know why I wasn't informed about these violations when they happened." When Fiona received the email containing comprehensive documentation of ZaneTech's environmental violations and subsequent remediation efforts, she was genuinely surprised. The level of detail went beyond what was legally required for disclosure. She'd been prepared for a fight, not compliance. Scrolling through the files, she frowned. This didn't fit the narrative she'd been constructing. ZaneTech had indeed violated regulations, but they'd spent millions fixing the problems far more than the fines would have cost. There were internal memos showing Sebastian Zane had been furious about the violations and had fired 2 executives who tried to cover them up. Her phone rang, displaying an unknown number. "Miss Zimmerman, Sebastian Zane here. I was wondering if you received the documentation you requested." Fiona nearly dropped her phone. "Mr. Zane, yes, I received it. Thank you for your thoroughness." "Have you had a chance to review it?" "Some of it," she admitted. "It's quite extensive." "I'm sure you have questions. Would you be available for an interview? Off the record if you prefer." I'd like to explain our environmental strategy more completely. Fiona hesitated. This could be a trap-a-charm offensive to distract her from her investigation. But it could also be valuable access to one of the most influential CEOs in the country. On the record, she countered. At my office, not yours. There was a pause on the other end. Deal, tomorrow at 2 p.m. After hanging up, Fiona stared at her phone in disbelief. CEOs of multi-billion-dollar corporations didn't personally call journalists from small publications. And they certainly didn't agree to on-the-record interviews in the journalist's territory. Something wasn't adding up. Sebastian arrived at the Independent Chronicle's modest offices exactly on time, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of Fiona's rent. Her colleagues stared as she led him to a small conference room. Not exactly what you're used to, I imagine, she said, gesturing to the cramped space with its worn furniture. I started my company in a garage, he replied with a slight smile. This is practically luxury by comparison. Fiona arranged her recorder and notes. Mr. Zane, I appreciate your willingness to speak with me, but I have to ask, why are you really here? The Sebastian Zane I've researched doesn't personally handle press inquiries, especially not from publications our size. Direct as always, he said, seeming more amused than offended. The truth, your question caught me off guard yesterday. When I looked into it, I discovered things happening at my company that I wasn't aware of, and that's unacceptable to me. You expect me to believe you didn't know about multiple EPA violations? Yes, because it's the truth, he said firmly. I have 12,000 employees across 8 countries. I can't personally monitor everything, which is why I hire people I trust. In this case, that trust was misplaced. Fiona studied him carefully. Either he was an exceptional actor, or he was genuinely disturbed by what he'd discovered. Let me show you something, he continued, pulling out his tablet. These are the design specifications for our new manufacturing process. It reduces toxic waste by 87% compared to industry standards. For the next hour, Sebastian walked her through ZaneTech's environmental initiatives with a level of technical detail that surprised her. He didn't gloss over problems or speak in vague corporate platitudes. When she asked difficult questions, he answered them directly or admitted when he didn't know. You're not what I expected, Fiona said as their time was drawing to a close. What did you expect? The typical CEO, slick, evasive, surrounded by handlers ready to jump in when the conversation gets uncomfortable. Sebastian laughed. Trust me, my PR team is having collective heart palpitations right now. I told them I was doing this alone. Why? He considered the question. Because sometimes the official channels get in the way of the truth. And because you seemed like someone who wouldn't be satisfied with anything less than the truth. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something shifted in the atmosphere between them, a flicker of connection beyond the professional dynamic of CEO and journalist. Fiona cleared her throat. Well, thank you for your time, Mr. Zane. Sebastian, please, he said, standing. And I meant what I said about transparency. If you have more questions, call me directly. He handed her a business card with his personal number written on the back. After he left, Fiona sat alone in the conference room, turning the card over in her fingers. She'd come into this prepared to face an adversary, the embodiment of corporate greed. Instead, she'd met a man who defied her expectations at every turn. It was unsettling. The following week, Fiona's article ran on the front page of the Independent Chronicle. It was balanced, acknowledging ZaneTech's environmental violations while also detailing their remediation efforts and future initiatives. Her editor had been surprised by the even-handed approach, given her usual sharp criticism of corporate environmental policies. You going soft on us, Zimmerman? He'd asked, only half joking. The truth was, she'd simply reported what she found. And what she found didn't fit neatly into the story she'd originally set out to tell. When her phone rang that evening, she wasn't entirely surprised to see Sebastian's number. I read your article, he said without preamble, And are the PR people still having heart palpitations? Actually, they're ecstatic. They've never seen such balanced coverage. I think they want to canonize you. Fiona laughed despite herself. I just reported the facts. Which is rarer than it should be, he replied. Listen, I'm calling because I'm giving a talk at the Environmental Business Forum next week. It's about integrating sustainable practices into existing business models. I thought you might be interested in attending. As a journalist. As my guest, Sebastian clarified. Though if you find something worth writing about, I wouldn't object. Fiona hesitated. This was crossing a line from professional to personal, and she wasn't sure it was a good idea. I don't know if that would be appropriate. It's a public event with hundreds of attendees, he pointed out, but I understand if you're concerned about the appearance of impropriety. The way he said it without pressure or disappointment made her reconsider. Send me the details, I'll think about it. The forum was held at a downtown convention center, packed with business leaders and environmental advocates. Sebastian's keynote speech was refreshingly candid about the challenges companies face in balancing profit with sustainability. The truth is, going green costs money in the short term, he admitted to the audience. But the companies that survive the next 50 years will be the ones that make that investment now. Afterward, at the reception, Fiona found herself approached by other executives eager to share their perspectives once they learned she was a journalist. It was access she rarely got, and she filled pages of her notebook with quotes and insights. You look like you're enjoying yourself, Sebastian said, appearing at her side with 2 glasses of wine. He handed her one. It's a goldmine of information, she admitted. Though I'm not sure if they're all being this forthcoming because they want to be in your good graces or because they're afraid I'll write something unflattering. Probably both, he said with a wry smile. The corporate world runs on fear and favor, but not you. Oh, I'm not immune, he said. I just try to be aware of it. They moved to a quieter corner of the reception, and their conversation drifted from environmental policy to their personal backgrounds. Sebastian told her about growing up in a middle-class family, working his way through college, and maxing out credit cards to start ZaneTech in his 20s. Fiona shared how she'd become passionate about investigative journalism after uncovering corruption at her college newspaper. You know, when we first met, I thought you were just another corporate villain, she admitted after her second glass of wine. And now I'm reserving judgment, she said with a slight smile. Their eyes met again, and this time the connection between them was undeniable. Sebastian leaned slightly closer, but before he could say anything else, they were interrupted by one of his colleagues. As the evening wound down, Sebastian walked her to her car. Thank you for coming, he said. I hope it was worth your time. It was, Fiona acknowledged. I got enough material for at least 3 articles. And what about outside of work? He asked quietly. Would you be interested in continuing our conversation sometime? Maybe over dinner? The question hung in the air between them. Fiona knew the professional thing would be to decline. Dating a subject she'd written about might write about again was ethically complicated at best. I can't, she said finally. It wouldn't be appropriate. Sebastian nodded, accepting her decision without argument. I understand, but if you change your mind. He let the sentence trail off. Good night, Mr. Zane, she said, deliberately formal. Good night, Miss Zimmerman. Over the next few weeks, Fiona threw herself into her work, publishing a series of articles about corporate environmental practices that garnered significant attention. She was careful to include ZaneTech alongside other companies, neither singling them out for criticism nor giving them special treatment. But she couldn't stop thinking about Sebastian. Their conversations had challenged her preconceptions not just about him, but about the divide between corporations and environmental responsibility. There was a depth to him that had caught her off guard, an authenticity she rarely encountered in her work. When her phone rang one evening with his number, she almost didn't answer. Fiona, he said when she finally picked up, I hope I'm not interrupting. "No, it's fine," she replied, trying to sound casual. "What can I help you with?" "I'm calling about your latest article, the one about transparency in corporate environmental reporting." "Oh," she tensed, waiting for criticism. "It was excellent. You made points I hadn't considered before, especially about standardizing reporting metrics across industries." "Thank you," she said, surprised by the praise. "Actually, we're implementing some of your suggestions. Our quarterly environmental impact report will include the expanded metrics you recommended." Fiona was momentarily speechless. "You're changing your corporate reporting because of an article I wrote." When someone makes a good point, I listen. "Regardless of whether they turn down my dinner invitation," he added, a smile evident in his voice. She couldn't help but laugh. "That's actually really impressive. I was hoping you might be willing to preview the report format before we finalize it, as a consultant officially, paid of course." "I can't take money from a company I cover journalistically," she said immediately. "I thought you might say that. How about this, you review it as a professional courtesy, and in exchange, I'll give you an exclusive interview when we release the report." It was a fair offer, one that maintained her journalistic integrity while acknowledging her expertise. Deal. The next day, Fiona found herself back at ZaneTech headquarters, this time in a legitimate professional capacity. Sebastian had arranged for her to meet with his environmental compliance team to review the new reporting format. After 2 hours of productive discussion, Sebastian appeared at the conference room door. "How's it going?" the team leader smiled. "Miss Zimmerman has been incredibly helpful. We're incorporating most of her suggestions." "Excellent. Mind if I borrow her for a quick tour?" "There's something I want to show her." Sebastian led Fiona through the research and development wing of ZaneTech, where engineers were working on various prototypes. He stopped at a large laboratory space where several scientists were gathered around what looked like a water filtration system. "This is our newest project," he explained. "A low-cost water purification system designed for communities in developing countries. It removes contaminants using a fraction of the energy of current methods." Fiona watched as one of the scientists demonstrated how the system worked. "This is impressive," she admitted. "But what's the business model? These communities can't afford expensive equipment." "That's the point," Sebastian said. "We're licensing the technology at minimal cost for humanitarian applications while selling it at market rates for industrial use. The industrial sales subsidize the humanitarian ones. And this is profitable, eventually," he said with a shrug. "Right now it's more about doing the right thing. Not everything has to maximize shareholder value in the short term." As they continued the tour, Fiona found herself seeing ZaneTech and Sebastian in a new light. His passion was evident in the way he spoke about the company's projects, especially those with social and environmental benefits. "Why did you really invite me here today?" she asked as they walked back to the main building. Sebastian considered the question. "Because you ask the hard questions. Most people in my position are surrounded by yes men. You're not afraid to tell me when you think I'm wrong, and that's valuable. And there are no other motivations." She pressed. He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't attracted to you, Fiona, but I respect your professional boundaries. Today was genuinely about your expertise, not personal interests." His honesty disarmed her. "I appreciate that." After finalizing her recommendations for the environmental report, Fiona left ZaneTech with mixed emotions. The professional part of her was satisfied with the work she'd done, but personally, she couldn't ignore the connection she felt with Sebastian. A week later, she received a formal invitation to ZaneTech's annual charity gala benefiting environmental conservation efforts. Attached was a handwritten note from Sebastian. No strings attached. "Just thought you might find it interesting to see how the corporate world approaches philanthropy for better or worse." Fiona decided to attend, telling herself it was for journalistic purposes. The gala was held at the city's Natural History Museum, transformed for the evening with elegant decorations, and displays highlighting conservation projects around the world. She spotted Sebastian across the room, engaged in conversation with several guests. He looked different, somehow more relaxed than in their previous encounters, laughing easily with those around him. When he caught sight of her, his face lit up in a way that made her heart skip a beat. "You came," he said, making his way to her side. "I wasn't sure you would." "Professional curiosity," she explained, though they both knew it wasn't the whole truth. "Well, since you're here professionally, let me introduce you to some people who might interest you." Throughout the evening, Sebastian introduced her to environmental scientists, conservation leaders, and corporate executives who were genuinely committed to sustainability. It was clear they respected him not just as a powerful CEO, but as someone who shared their values. As the formal dinner concluded and the band began to play, Sebastian turned to her. "Would one dance compromise your journalistic integrity?" Fiona hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I think my professional ethics can withstand 3 minutes of dancing." On the dance floor, with Sebastian's hand resting lightly on her waist, Fiona found it increasingly difficult to maintain the professional distance she'd insisted upon. "You know," she said quietly, "when I started investigating ZaneTech, I was convinced you were another corporate hypocrite talking about sustainability while polluting behind closed doors. And now I know it's more complicated than that. You're trying to change things from within a system that's resistant to change. That's admirable," Sebastian smiled. "Coming from you, that's quite a compliment." As the music ended, he didn't immediately step away. "Fiona, I've respected your professional boundaries, but I have to ask again, would you have dinner with me sometime? Not as a CEO and journalist, just as two people who enjoy each other's company." Looking up at him, Fiona made a decision. "Yes," she said simply, "I would like that." Their first official date was at a small, out-of-the-way restaurant where they were unlikely to be recognized. Without the context of work to define their interaction, they discovered a natural ease between them. Sebastian told stories about his failures, the products that flopped, the times he nearly bankrupted his company. Fiona shared her frustrations with the declining state of journalism and her fears for the future of investigative reporting. "I've been thinking about your water purification project," Fiona said as they lingered over dessert. "Have you considered partnering with international aid organizations for distribution?" "We've had some preliminary discussions," Sebastian replied, "but getting the right partners is crucial. The technology is only valuable if it actually reaches the communities who need it. I have some contacts from when I covered the water crisis in East Africa," she offered. "I could put you in touch with them," Sebastian smiled. "I'd appreciate that. See. This is why I wanted to have dinner with you. You bring perspectives I wouldn't otherwise hear." As weeks turned into months, their relationship deepened. Fiona maintained her journalistic independence, occasionally writing pieces critical of corporate practices, including some at ZaneTech. Sebastian never complained, instead using her critiques to identify areas for improvement. Their relationship wasn't without complications. Fiona faced questions from colleagues about her objectivity. Sebastian dealt with board members concerned about his personal involvement with a journalist known for corporate exposés. But they navigated these challenges with honest communication, setting clear boundaries between their professional and personal lives. 6 months after their first date, they found themselves walking along the riverfront after dinner, the city lights reflecting on the water. "I've been offered a position at the National Herald," Fiona said abruptly. "Senior investigative reporter focusing on environmental issues." Sebastian's step faltered slightly. "That's in Washington, isn't it?" "Yes, it's a great opportunity," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Are you going to take it?" Fiona stopped walking and turned to face him. "I don't know, it's what I've been working toward for years, but things have changed. I've changed." She took a deep breath. "I love you, Sebastian, and the thought of leaving you makes this decision a lot more complicated than it would have been a year ago." It was the first time either of them had said those words. Sebastian's expression softened as he took her hands in his. "I love you too," he said simply. "And I would never ask you to give up your career for me. That's not what love is." "Then what do we do?" Sebastian thought for a moment. "ZaneTech has been considering opening a policy office in Washington. Perhaps it's time to accelerate those plans." Fiona's eyes widened. "You would move your company for me." "Not the whole company," he clarified with a smile. "But I could split my time between here and Washington. And eventually, maybe we could find a more permanent solution." "You do that." "Fiona, when I met you, I thought you were just a difficult journalist who might cause problems for my company. I never expected you to change my perspective on so many things or to become the most important person in my life. So yes, I would reorganize my schedule, open a new office, or make whatever other adjustments necessary to be with you." Tears welled in Fiona's eyes. "That's the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me." Even though it involved corporate restructuring, he teased gently, she laughed through her tears. Even then. They stood together by the river, the future unfolding before them with all its complexities and possibilities. Their relationship had begun with confrontation, developed through respect, and blossomed into love, a journey neither had anticipated when they first locked eyes across that crowded press conference. 2 years later, Sebastian stood at the altar, watching as Fiona walked toward him in a simple but elegant white dress. Their wedding was intimate, attended by close friends and family, held in a garden overlooking the same river where they had first confessed their love. In the front row sat Fiona's editor from the Independent Chronicle alongside Sebastian's executive team, a visual representation of the worlds they had brought together. As they exchanged vows, Sebastian thought about the unlikely path that had led them here. "When you first questioned me at that press conference, I never imagined I'd be standing here today," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You challenged me to be better as a CEO, as an environmental steward, and as a man. Your honesty broke through every wall I had built, and I am a better person for loving you." Fiona smiled through happy tears. "I came looking for a story about corporate greed and found a partner committed to making a difference. You showed me that change is possible from within the system, and that integrity can exist even in boardrooms. You never asked me to compromise my values, only to keep an open mind and heart, which turned out to be the best advice I've ever taken." Their life together continued to bridge different worlds. Fiona's investigative work at the National Herald earned her a Pulitzer Prize for a series on environmental justice. Sebastian expanded ZaneTech's humanitarian initiatives, with the water purification project reaching millions in underserved communities. When their daughter was born a year after their wedding, they named her Hope, a reflection of what they had found in each other and what they wished to create in the world. On Hope's first birthday, as they watched her take tentative steps across their living room floor, Sebastian pulled Fiona close. "Do you ever think about how unlikely it was that we ended up here?" he asked. "If you hadn't asked that question at the press conference, if I hadn't been curious enough to call on you." "I think we would have found each other eventually," Fiona replied. "Some connections are just meant to be, even between a skeptical journalist and the CEO she was determined to expose." Sebastian laughed and kissed her forehead. "I'm grateful every day for your honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Promise you'll never stop challenging me." "That," Fiona said with a smile, "is a promise I will definitely keep." And she did, through the years that followed, their partnership growing stronger as they continued to push each other toward greater integrity, compassion, and purpose. What had begun as professional antagonism had transformed into a love story neither could have anticipated, but both treasured beyond measure, proof that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful destinations.